Thank you. The next item of business is a debate on motion 18671 in the name of John Swinney on priorities for Scotland. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on First Minister John Swinney to speak to and to move the motion. Up to 13 minutes, please.
President Officer, I move the motion in my name. We gather today at the start of the fifth and final year of the sixth session of Scotland's National Parliament. Our Parliament is over a quarter of a century old, its place anchored at the heart of decision-making in Scotland today. A Parliament elected to chart a way forward for Scotland and to wrestle with the challenges that face our people. And in this session of Parliament, our country has faced a number of those challenges. The lasting effects of the COVID pandemic, the illegal invasion of Ukraine and its consequences for energy costs and security. In the Middle East, we have witnessed, and I have repeatedly condemned, Hamas's barbaric attacks on the 7th of October 2023, and I also share the concerns of other governments and other international leaders that the brutal actions of the Israeli government in Gaza constitute a genocide. This has unleashed widespread suffering and caused such anguish. And in the UK, we are seeing the prolonged application of austerity at a time of desperate need to rebuild in our society. So these are difficult days, and for many in our society, the implications of these events are that money is tight, prices are rising, and hope is in short supply. And the danger in such circumstances is that all of those difficulties are marshalled together to be made the fault of others in our society, that some get blamed for supposedly causing these problems. And that has been ever present during the summer recess, when migrants have been put in the spotlight and the politics of intolerance have been stoked by some. Well, let me be clear at the outset of this final year of this parliamentary session that I reject that demonising behaviour. Let me be clear that I intend to defeat the politics of fear and division by offering a clear, principled alternative based on the decent, welcoming values that have served Scotland so well throughout my lifetime. That is why I want to use every opportunity available to my government to give that leadership to Scotland and to deliver improvements in the lives of people in Scotland. Since becoming First Minister, I have heard loud and clear the desire of the people for both effective delivery in government alongside a meaningful message of hope. Today, I will speak mostly about how we have, how we are and how we will continue to deliver for the people of Scotland in ways that will improve their lives. It is a story of much achieved but more still to do, of a corner that is being turned, of progress that is once again being made. So let me start with the National Health Service. I often hear my political rivals say that the National Health Service is broken. I reject that. I say thanks to our dedicated staff, Scotland's National Health Service remains fundamentally strong and an asset for this country. Yes, it has problems. Why would it not, after a decade and more of Westminster austerity, after Brexit and after the foundation-shaking experience of COVID? And that's not just my view, but that is what the Labour Party says about the NHS in Labour-run Wales into the bargain. But in Scotland, 97% of people leave hospital with no delay. 95% are registered with an NHS dentist. And since November 2023, 7 million treatments have been delivered. Scotland's core accident and emergency system has consistently outperformed those in England and Wales for the last decade, repeated again in the most recent figures. And these are not just numbers. Last year, over 1 million patients were seen within 4 hours in our accident and emergency system, around 1 in every 30 seconds in Scotland. I'll give way to Mr Cole-Hamilton.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm very grateful to the First Minister for giving way. I'm sure that everyone across this chamber will support our hard-working NHS staff. But does he recognise that those words will come as cold comfort to everyone who's been waiting in line on a phone call for a GP appointment this afternoon? For every one of the 2,000 Scots who are stuck in hospital well enough to go home, but too frail to do so without a care package? And will he recognise that that will come as cold comfort for everyone looking for social care in general in our communities?
First Minister.
Well, Let me just address those particular issues. We promised 150,000 extra appointments and procedures in our programme for government, but we now expect to exceed this and deliver 213,000. That means in total we will deliver an extra 300,000 appointments and procedures. Extra capacity that means right now inpatient waiting lists are falling. Right now, a record number of hip and knee replacements are being carried out. Right now, an increase in the number of paramedics, an increase in the number of GPs, and more people surviving cancer than ever before. So yes, there is work to be done, but substantial progress has been made in strengthening the National Health Service under this government's leadership of the National Health Service.
Rachel Hamilton.
I totally believe that John Swinney is just making up what he's saying here. There are 900,000 people on waiting lists. That is 1 in 6 people waiting. What has he got to say to my constituents and everybody else waiting on lists who are in pain?
First Minister.
Well, I'm very happy to reinforce the point that I said a moment ago. The extra capacity that means right now inpatient waiting lists are falling in Scotland, and I'm happy to put that on the record once again for Rachel Hamilton's benefit today. And today, the latest statistics confirm this progress, with planned care activity up and the number of operations performed in July 2025 at the highest level in over 5 years. The CAMHS waiting time standard met for the 3rd time in a row, and the lowest number of 8- and 12-hour waits for A&E since September 2023, despite the highest July attendance level for 6 years. That is not a broken National Health Service. That is a National Health Service we can be proud of. An NHS that, after COVID and after this government's decision to put record investment into the National Health Service, record investment, of course, that neither the Labour Party nor the Conservatives in this Parliament supported, is getting better once again. Much achieved, yes, but much more to do to strengthen the National Health Service in Scotland. Thanks to choices made here in Scotland, child poverty is now lower than it has been for a decade, despite UK Government actions that have pushed more children below the poverty line. Indeed, if Scotland had the same rate of child poverty as the rest of the United Kingdom, an additional 90,000 Scottish children would be in poverty. Progress delivered because of innovative policies, made in Scotland policies such as the Scottish Child Payment, but also because of the prioritisation, because of the hard work of bringing people together to ensure that we delivered those lower levels of child poverty in Scotland. And that has an effect on our schools, where free school meals have been expanded and where the Pupil Equity Fund has enabled 3,000 additional staff to be employed, staff who can work with children to ensure they have more of the support that they need to thrive. The first fruits of these interventions can now be seen. I'll give way to Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank the First Minister for taking the intervention. Can the First Minister set out to the Chamber how many newly qualified teachers are unemployed this year as a result of this government's failure to match supply and demand in the teaching workforce?
First Minister.
What's helped in relation to the recruitment of teachers has been the pupil equity funding that we've put into the budget, the increased levels of local government funding that the Finance Secretary put into the budget, and which Pam Duncan-Glancy was unable to vote for when the budget came to Parliament. So that didn't help. That didn't help one tiny little bit. The first fruits of these interventions can now be seen, Presiding Officer, with more Scots from the most deprived areas entering university full-time, with the poverty-related attainment gap continuing to narrow at all 3 key qualification levels. Across the board, more and more Scottish children are getting the chance to learn and to grow in skills and in confidence, with attainment levels in key stages of primary school and secondary school in literacy and numeracy reaching record highs. And there's progress too on the economy. Scotland is by far the fastest growing start-up economy in the United Kingdom and one of the fastest growing in Europe. Here, new business and corporations have increased by almost a fifth in the first half of 2025 compared with the final 6 months of 2024. We remain the best place outside London for attracting overseas investment. Investment in the tech sector alone has increased by a massive 120% between 2020 and 2024. Wages are up in real terms, unemployment is down and our economy is growing. Much achieved and more to do, and no doubt more will be done, because life is tough right now for the people we serve, and we are acting to address those concerns. I'll give way to Mr Ewing.
Fergus Ewing.
Most grateful to the First Minister for giving way. Whilst Norway forges ahead, our oil and gas industry is dying before our very eyes. Will the First Minister at last support it, or will he, like a modern-day Brutus, go down in history as its co-assassin?
First Minister.
I think the voices in the oil and gas sector that speak to me tell me that the cost regime that is applied by the taxation levels of the United Kingdom Government, which this Government does not support, is the actions that are undermining investment to sustain activity in the North Sea, as this Government invests heavily in supporting the energy transition that we have to make to ensure that we achieve our objectives on climate change. And that brings me to my comments on energy. Now, I know that people in Scotland share my frustration that households are not feeling the benefit of the rapid expansion of low-cost renewable energy generation here in Scotland. A clear Scottish policy success is not delivering the savings to consumers that it should because of policy choices made by successive United Kingdom governments, and some of what Mr Ewing has just raised with me is relevant in that respect. Westminster will happily take our energy, but they will do nothing to lower our energy bills and nothing to give Scottish business the competitive advantage of lower energy costs. That's why Scotland's energy resources should be in Scotland's hands, but that can only come with the control that independence would give to the people of Scotland. It's my firm belief that our vast low-cost renewable energy generation has the capacity to be as transformational for Scotland's economy and for the wealth of our people as corporation tax was for Ireland's. It has the capacity to send Scotland on a new and a more prosperous course. The fundamental truth that anchors all of my politics is that the people who care most about Scotland, the people who choose to live here, should be the ones setting our nation's course, not politicians in Westminster for whom Scotland is too often just an afterthought. It is a principle that has been delivered in part by the creation of this Parliament. We have some ability, but limited ability, to shape our nation. But for so long as the big decisions over our budget, over our economy, over immigration, membership of the EU, energy, jobs and wages are taken elsewhere, there is a brake on what our country can achieve. Westminster choices that hold us back when we should be moving forward. Let's take immigration. Not having control of immigration means that our National Health Service and our care homes are facing a critical staff shortage. The UK Government has made it more difficult for them to recruit abroad, and that impacts on the levels of care that they can offer. It is a completely unnecessary problem, a problem manufactured by Westminster's toxic immigration debate, a Westminster policy that is doing and will do real damage to Scotland's National Health Service and our care sector. And the solution is a simple one. A Parliament with a power... The First Minister is concluding. I'll need to bring my remarks to a close. A Parliament with the power to create an immigration policy that actually works for the people of Scotland. We move ahead on eradicating child poverty, and then a new Westminster decision pushes us back. We seek to create jobs and boost prosperity, but a clumsy, ill-judged Westminster National Insurance tax grab pushes businesses to the brink. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government will do everything we can within our powers to secure the future of the people of Scotland, to improve their lives. But make no mistake, This country needs to have the full powers of independence to transform the lives of our people, and this government is going to work to deliver exactly that. I move the motion in my name.
Thank you. I now call on Russell Finlay to speak to and to move Amendment 1867 1.4. Up to 9 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. In just over 8 months' time, this parliamentary session comes to an end. Over the past 4 years, Parliament's achievements have been too few and its mistakes too many. Barely anything has been done to encourage the economic growth that powers our country and pays the bills. Little effort has been made to create jobs. There has been next to no consideration about how to make life easier for workers and businesses, or to give families a helping hand with ever-rising bills. This government has nurtured a culture of anti-aspiration, holding back those who want to get on. In this time, when people have looked at Holyrood, they have been dismayed at what they have seen. They watched as the SNP passed extreme gender legislation. They watched the disastrous attempt at a deposit return scheme, which harmed business and hammered taxpayers. They watched them target free speech, criminalising what can be said in your own home. They watched them fail to build 2 ferries or stem the desperate death toll from drugs, as today's figures show. Why does almost everything that Holyrood touches go so badly wrong? Why does it waste so much time debating things that are either out with its remit or really not that important? All the while, it neglects the issues, the real issues that it does have the power to change. Now, whatever John Swinney claimed today, the blunt reality is that this Parliament has not focused on what people truly care about. It hasn't made it any easier to get a GP appointment. It hasn't fixed dangerous roads. It hasn't raised school standards. In short, Holyrood has not focused on Scotland's priorities. I will.
Does Russell Finlay think that this line of argument both keeps his MSPs and also keeps the population voting for him, given they are at record low levels at the moment? Do you think this is working for you and for your party?
Always through the chair. Russell Finlay.
Let's talk about this Parliament and what it can do, or rather what it is not do, because of this government. It does not look at the interests of those who are aspirational or ambitious, nor the priorities of workers and businesses, nor the priorities, frankly, of anyone in mainstream Scotland who just wants politicians to show some basic common sense. Since becoming an MSP in 2021, I've been struck by how disconnected this place is from the real world. I became a politician to get things done and try to make a difference to people's lives. But if you ask the average person what Holyrood has done to help them in the past 4 years, I do not think you would get a positive answer. Pose that question to a small business owner in Perth or Peebles struggling to stay afloat, or a high street worker in Dumfriesshire or Ayrshire trying to get a mortgage, or families in Glasgow and Edinburgh who work around the clock to make ends meet, while others stay idle only to get things handed to them on a plate. Or oil and gas workers in the North East, where I was this morning, and those at Grangemouth who think this government would rather they lost their jobs. Or young people leaving school across Scotland who despair at the lack of opportunity. Yes, I will.
First Minister.
I'm grateful to Mr Finlay for giving way. Let me just give him a flavour of some of the things the government is practically doing to help people with the cost of living challenges that they face, like the fact that council tax bills are generally 30% lower than south of the border, that water bills are 20% lower than south of the border, that yesterday we abolished peak rail fares, which will, for the average commuter between Edinburgh and Glasgow, will halve the cost of their rail journey on every single day. These are, and then for small businesses in Perth, there's many small businesses in Perth that will benefit from the small business bonus scheme that this government voted for in the budget and which Mr Finlay never voted for in the budget. So that's just a flavour of what the government's doing to protect people's income.
Russell Finlay.
bit of a long intervention. I'm very glad that the First Minister listened to the Scottish Conservatives last December, who called for the end of peak rail fares. That was very good of him. But what he should also do is stop hammering households and businesses with additional tax and additional red tape. This Parliament must face up to the fact that the public agrees on one thing: this place isn't working for them. We are always elected to serve the interests of the public. In the short time before the next election, it's time that we started to do so. My party is the only one here willing to stand up and admit our mistakes, say plainly what we need to do better, and commit to change.
Members.
But we're really not the only ones, Neil Gray, who should be doing that. He's very noisy when he sat down.
Cabinet Secretary, please desist.
The only way any of us will win back public trust and earn the right to represent people is if we do things differently. And in the 8 months ahead, the Parliament has the opportunity to do that. Not fritter away endless time on debates that achieve nothing than let MSPs feel good about themselves. We need to use this time to kick-start Scotland's economy and get it growing again. We must make this a top priority. The focus of this Parliament should be on the creation of jobs and the expansion of business. We have to create the conditions for Scotland's economic renewal. We have to repair the relationship between Parliament and business. We have to nurture an environment where more people have confidence to start a business. More of the same from John Swinney is just not an option. Look at where we are now. 4 out of every 5 small and medium-sized enterprises in Scotland believe that their very survival is at risk over the next 12 months. Just 1 in 10 Scottish firms, that's 1 in 10, thinks the Scottish Government understands the business environment. A report from the CBI and the Fraser-Vallender Institute found that the Scottish economy is struggling to keep pace with the UK-wide economy on almost every metric. John Swinney only knows how to squeeze more out of workers and businesses while imposing more rules that stifle innovation and expansion. For more than 18 years of SNP rule, our economy has been in decline. The business community feels overlooked or ignored. Workers don't get new opportunities from the SNP, they just get higher bills. The entire SNP economic model is at breaking point. Our country can't afford to keep spending so much on a huge and unreformed public sector and an ever-growing benefits bill. It's unsustainable to always take more and spend more. It's unfair to expect people to continually forfeit more of their own hard-earned money just to watch Holyrood politicians throw it down the drain. More of the same reckless agenda from John Swinney risks the solvency of Scotland. They need to abandon the folly of SNP economics, which prioritises abstract and woke thinking. And does anyone really know what the well-being economy actually is?
What is it?
And the only way to change is to instead put our focus on Scotland's economic renewal. Opportunity and aspiration, productivity and profit. That's where my party stands. We're going to reconnect with the astute values of mainstream Scotland. We will focus on efficient spending, we will champion self-reliance and demand freedom for people to aspire and to succeed. And we will bring forward common-sense solutions to cut red tape. A thriving economy gives us a chance to fix public services. A failing economy will mean only more of the same from this failing government. That's the choice facing this Parliament over the next 8 months. Take the path towards prosperity or stay on the SNP road to nowhere. That will be the choice facing the country next year. A continued slide into stagnation under the SNP or a new way forward for the common good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Finlay. And could I ask you to please move your amendment?
Move the amendment, yep.
Thank you very much. I now call on Anas Sarwar to speak to and to move Amendment 18671.2. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'd like to welcome all members back to the Chamber for the new session. And it may be a new session, but for this knackered SNP government, it's just the same old script and the same old tired voices No matter how much John Swinney shouts about hope and delivery, the truth is he's hopeless at delivery, and Scotland can see it. Because as much as he can try and reheat and rehash the same old playbook, the difference now is that Scots can see right through him. John Swinney talks of his priorities for Scotland, but in his own motion, he claims that the only way he can deliver on these priorities is, surprise, surprise, through independence. But I do want to give John Swinney credit. He is a politician of rare consistency. The guy that's been in government for almost 20 years and over that time has pleaded powerlessness all that time over his ability to actually improve Scotland for his entire career. And his answer to every hard question remains the same: blame somebody else or talk about independence. But while he continues to beat that drum, the people of Scotland are paying the price of his and his government's inaction. And the government's inaction is clear for all to see across all of John Swinney's stated claimed priorities. I'm happy to.
First Minister.
I'm grateful to Mr Sarwar for giving way. Now, I quoted a statistic in my speech, which was that if Scotland had the same level of child poverty as the rest of the United Kingdom, 90,000 more children would be living in poverty in Scotland today. Now, those figures are because of the actions that this Parliament and this Government has taken to keep children out of poverty. Why can't Mr Sarwar see the value of that impact on the lives of children in Scotland? And why is he prepared to support a Labour government that's pushing child poverty in the opposite direction to the one it should be going in?
Anna Sauer.
I welcome the Scottish Child Payment. It's something we have continually supported. But what this government is failing to do is to challenge structural poverty, which I'll come on to in a moment. Take our public services. On John Swinney's watch, our public services are in utter disarray. Almost 900,000 Scots are on an NHS waiting list. Over 100,000 Scots are waiting over a year for treatment. The number of cancer deaths is rising. A&E waits remain dangerously long, and former routine services like dentistry and hip and knee replacements are being slowly privatised due to the failure of the SNP to provide the level of services people need. Every single week, the Health Secretary says no, they're not. Every single week, Scottish families are forced to empty their savings or remortgage their homes to pay for medical treatment, and the responsibility for that lies with John Swinney and the SNP government. If the Health Secretary wants to stand up and apologise, he's free to do so.
Neil Gray.
Of course, I pointed this out to Jackie Bailey earlier, that the rate of private operations in the health service in Scotland is 54% lower than it is in the NHS in England. But does Anas Sarwar support his UK government colleagues in reducing the number of health and care visas being approved by 77% over the last year? And how does he think that that, and threatening the deportation of social care workers in Scotland, is really going to help the health and social care services in Scotland?
Anna Sauer.
There we go again, the same old playbook, blame somebody else. The harsh fact is this, that 40% of the hip and knee replacements that happen in our country happen in the private sector because of this government's incompetence. And our schools too are feeling the strain after 2 decades of the SNP. The poverty-related attainment gap stubbornly persists. Teacher numbers decimated in areas across Scotland, and teachers, pupils and parents are fearing for their safety as discipline breaks down in schools across Scotland, and again this government turns a blind eye. And John Swinney mentioned earlier on about tackling poverty and child poverty, but we all know that you can't properly tackle poverty unless you address the structural issues, one of which is ensuring that people have safe and secure homes to live in. And under the SNP, that is not the case for too many Scots. We're in the midst of a housing emergency. Record numbers of homeless children left to spend their nights in hotels and B&Bs, and house building completions are at record lows. And a generation of young Scots feel totally frozen out of the housing market, with home ownership an unattainable dream. And again, the responsibility of that lies with John Swinney and this SNP government. And just this morning, the human cost of SNP failure was demonstrated again. 1,017 deaths from drug abuse in the last year. 6,000 deaths since the drugs crisis was declared. Drugs deaths still 3 times higher in Scotland than the rest of the UK, and the highest in Europe. Every single one of those, an avoidable death, precious lives lost needlessly, because of the scourge of drugs. And again, some of that relates back to this government cutting rehab beds and cutting to our hard-pressed police and so much more. And again, the responsibility lies with John Swinney and this SNP government. But we all know John Swinney only really has one priority in the next 8 months: to somehow try and cling on to power. And he's going to use the independence card to keep his knackered, failing government in power. He's not interested in improving people's lives today, fixing services tomorrow, or making Scotland a better place anytime soon. It's just desperately talk about independence. But why is he doing it? Now, John Swinney is many things, but he's not daft. He's been in this game a very, very, very long time, and he knows he can't stand in that election on his records because Scots have had enough. And that's why he wants to try and make it about independence, not because he believes he can achieve it, not because he thinks Scotland can win, SNP can win a majority, but it's the only way he thinks he can keep enough people together to sneak over the line and cling on to power. It's cynical, it's desperate, and it's John Swinney all over, but I don't believe it will work, because Scots are canny and can see right through it. Now, John Swinney shouts about focus groups. The focus groups say you guys are out and getting beat. Because whether Scots voted yes or no, people have had enough, and they want a government that gets back to basics, that fixes the NHS, schools and transport, and they know the SNP is failing on every measure. And he wants to talk about focus groups. Ask the people of Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse who helped beat the SNP. Ask them in Barrhead who helped beat the SNP. And I can promise you, in Scotland next year, they're going to help us beat the SNP all over again. Because after nearly 2 decades, Scotland's crying out for a new direction. They want a government that will fix public services and get the basics right. They want a government that shares their ambitions for Scotland's future. And that's why we'll tackle the housing crisis by actually building the homes. We'll get our businesses growing by backing entrepreneurship. We will stop the antisocial behaviour in our schools by banning mobile phones, supporting teachers and supporting our communities, and we'll fix our NHS by taking on the bureaucrats, empowering doctors and pulling out all the stops to clear the backlogs. That's the new direction Scotland needs. New thinking, new ideas, new leadership, not the same old arguments from the same old knackered SNP. I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you. I now call on Ross Greer to speak to and move Amendment 1861.3. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I move the amendment in my name. I think we do have a lot to be proud of. The Scottish Greens certainly have a lot to be proud of about this session of Parliament so far. The removal of peak rail fares that will save commuters hundreds and in some cases thousands of pounds. The fact that this is the only part of the UK where child poverty is going down. That just 2 weeks ago, when the schools started again, there were 6,000 more children eligible for free school meals as a result of agreements made in this Parliament. But we can't deny the fact that people are angry. Communities are being pulled apart. People, families feel unhappy. And it's because their lives are not getting better. This country isn't working for them. Whether it's the cost of living or the climate crisis, it's not because the systems are broken. They're rigged. And that's what we need to change. And to change it, we need to take on those who have rigged the system. We need to take on the super-rich, the big polluters and the greedy landlords. My message to the people of Scotland is that the Scottish Green Party is on your side. We are fighting your corner. There are too many politicians, including now in this chamber, whipping up hatred in our communities, lying to the public about who the enemy is. Trans people and asylum seekers aren't the problem. They didn't sell off your community centre, privatise the buses or increase rents. We will take on the bigots and the conmen directing that anger at the most vulnerable in our society. We will direct it at those who are often bankrolled by the people who are really at fault, the people who have really rigged the system. This country isn't working for ordinary people because it wasn't designed to. And I want to change that. I'm proud of the Greens' track record on changing the system. We have taken every opportunity to rebalance the scales in favour of our planet and ordinary people. We're delivering rent controls, taking power from the haves and giving it to the have-nots. We stand up for Scotland's natural heritage against corporate greed, like our campaign to protect Loch Lomond from Flamingoland. And we have fundamentally transferred wealth in this society, taxing those who can afford it, to expand the Scottish Child Payment, to expand free school meals, to deliver free bus travel for young people, to buck that UK-wide trend of rising child poverty. And yes, I'm proud that we did that through cooperation with colleagues in the SNP. But there is so much more to do. That's why the Green Amendment today focuses on our public finances and tax. It is outrageous that, as the Scottish Government confirmed last week, the 2% richest households in this country have more wealth than the bottom 50%. The Finance Secretary agreed with me this morning that that is not good enough, but the Scottish Government does not appear to have a plan to go any further on wealth redistribution. I'm proud of what we've already done together, but more is clearly needed. We cannot lift more children out of poverty, cut emissions or hire more hospital staff without the money to pay for it. And people are sick of politicians with big promises, little follow-through and absolutely no plan to pay for what they've committed to. Greens have a plan, because we are brave enough to be honest with the electorate that a better society needs to be paid for, and the very wealthiest people can afford and should be paying far more. Now, despite the doomsday predictions over, I think, most of the last decade, changes in our tax policy delivered by the Greens have worked, and they are popular. Our income tax changes mean that this year alone there is £1.7 billion more to deliver for public services like our schools, our hospitals and public transport. We've doubled the additional dwelling supplement, taking on the buy-to-let landlords, particularly short-term landlords, and freeing up thousands of homes for young families to live in, whilst raising £250 million to invest into public services. And we've delivered more powers for local government, like the visitor levy, new powers that will raise millions of pounds to deliver on the issues that people really care about, like the quality of their roads and pavements, libraries and schools. But we need to recognise it is no wonder that people are angry when they see a hugely wealthy country, and this is one of the wealthiest countries in the history of the world, and they still cannot afford to take their children on a holiday. They can't even afford to buy new school uniforms. They can't afford their rent. That's why the Green Amendment calls on the Scottish Government to make bold use of its existing tax-raising powers, including the creation of new revenue-raising mechanisms for local government. And that, of course, means fixing our broken council tax system. It cannot be right that the poorest households are paying the highest share of their income in council tax. It cannot be right that we have a tax system where more than half of all households in this country are paying the wrong rate, one based on property values from before I was even born. And I say to the Scottish Government that their line that we can only achieve council tax reform through consensus just isn't going to work. There is no prospect of consensus, particularly looking ahead to the next session of Parliament. But there is a majority to deliver council tax reform if the Government are brave enough to lead that majority. It is absolutely true that Scotland has done more to tackle child poverty and the climate emergency than any other UK nation. But it is also true that we are still not doing enough on either. And indeed, when it comes to climate action, the Government's ambitions are being scaled back. Scotland needs MSPs and government ministers who are bold and brave enough to take on those who have rigged the system, the super-rich and the big polluters. Only by doing that can we defeat the forces of hate who are exploiting our communities and build the fairer, greener society that the vast majority of people in Scotland want to see.
Thank you. Could I remind those members who wish to speak in the debate to check that they have in fact pressed the request to speak buttons? And I now call on Alex Cole-Hamilton to speak to and to move Amendment 18671.1. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer, and I move the amendment in my name. Before I start, can I associate myself with the remarks of the First Minister about the situation in Gaza? I think the scenes we've seen unfolding there, particularly this summer, should really strike humanitarian chord with every member in this chamber. Presiding Officer, from Stranraer to Shetland, from Skye to St Andrews, Scotland has so much going for it. But everywhere you go, people say that right now things feel broken. Talk to people the length and breadth of the country about how they're feeling. People are tired, they're frustrated, and they're right to be. And they will not stand for the protestations by this First Minister, who, in addressing my intervention, effectively took to the words of Jim Callaghan with crisis, what crisis? It is all around you. It can take weeks to see your GP. You are lucky if you can find an NHS dentist that will see you locally. And the waits for many operations and treatments are measured out in years. People are stuck in hospital because they can't get a care home place or the support they need to live back at home. Islanders are fed up of ferry cancellations. Communities are fed up of dangerous roads like the A9, the backbone of the Perthshire and Highland communities, which finishes each year with a body count. Families worry about violence at school, the lack of support for pupils who need it, and whether they can find childcare that fits around their work. I will take an intervention from Fergus Ewing.
I was pleased that Alex Cole-Hamilton mentioned the A9. Will the Liberals at the forthcoming election include a manifesto commitment to dual the A9 from Inverness to Perth and to bring forward, if possible, the completion of that dualling before the planned date of 2035?
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm grateful to Fergus Ewing. I also make the same commitment for the A96. Put simply, Presiding Officer, if the M8 was killing upwards of 10 people every year, it would be dualled by Christmas. And yet Highlanders have had to wait nearly 20 years of commitment after commitment only not to see that vital road dualled. People deserve better. Scotland deserves better, because nearly 2 decades into SNP rule, for so many people, it feels like our country simply isn't working as it should be, as it used to. The SNP have had long enough. We know that the only thing that will truly bring about change that Scotland needs is a change of government. Scotland needs change, and it needs to be change with fairness at its heart. Fairness for everyone, no matter who you are or where you come from. Liberal Democrats will always hold this government to account, but we will also roll up our sleeves, Presiding Officer, and get things done. It's what our councillors are doing, our MSPs are doing, and our record-breaking 72 Liberal Democrat MPs are doing as well. Presiding Officer, for us, the number one issue, both for the remainder of this term and the coming election, is the NHS and care in our communities. The equivalent of 1 in 6 Scots is now stuck on a waiting list. That means months of pain, anxiety, lost time. Liberal Democrats would invest in a first-rate health service so that you can see a GP or dentist when you need them. It's not that hard to imagine a time when we used to have that. That should be the aspiration now. We would deliver faster access to mental health treatment, because nobody should be left waiting years for help. All these waits are holding people back. They're holding growth back. They are holding our country back. On doorsteps across Scotland, families tell me the same story. Their bills are soaring. Their money just doesn't go as far as it used to, and they're struggling to get by. We would tackle this head-on with a national programme of insulation to bring warmth to the homes of Scotland and to bring down stubbornly high fuel costs. We also want local communities to truly benefit from renewables projects in their area, so people actually see the gains from Scotland's energy wealth. To be shivering in the shadow of a wind turbine, unable to heat your home, that's not a fair deal. Not when you live in a part of the country that is a powerhouse for the renewables revolution that will move us to net zero and guarantees energy security for all of these islands. Jobs in the trades, warmer homes, lower bills. That's the practical difference a competent government can make. Presiding Officer, it's 10 years since Nicola Sturgeon promised to close the poverty-related attainment gap. It was the number one priority, the yardstick of SNP government. But Scottish education has fallen further down the international rankings. Parents and teachers are increasingly worried about what's happening in classrooms, especially the violence. Workforce planning is a mess, leaving good teachers out of work. And the progress of closing that yawning attainment gap has been minuscule. We urgently need a plan to drive up education performance and improve outcomes for our young people. It means recruiting and retaining great teachers, properly supporting pupils with additional support needs, and ensuring every child gets the best possible start in life. Presiding Officer, I'm not given to quoting the words of Kemi Badenoch, but I will do so now. They are in local communities. A typical Liberal Democrat will be somebody who is good at fixing their church roof. Presiding Officer, sneering at the Lib Dems for being a party that will come and fix your church roof and be in your local community, it's something we actually hold as a badge of honour. It shows exactly why the Conservatives have lost the public's trust. So many people who once backed Ruth Davidson are completely scunnered at what that party has turned into. So we will be the champions for every town and village in Scotland, champions who will fight for carers, for those waiting on operations or care packages, for families who want to see a GP without weeks of delay, for parents who want the best for their children, for businesses that want to see a customs union and youth mobility scheme to fix our broken relationship with Europe. And finally, Presiding Officer, people are tired of political spin and the constant division. They want competence, compassion and care. That is what the Liberal Democrats stand for. Thousands of seemingly tiny acts of public service up and down this country, working to make our communities better, to fix what's broken, to build anew, to protect Liberal values at home and abroad. And that is how we restore hope in our communities and our trust in our politics, by fighting for change with fairness at its heart. Scotland deserves better, and the Liberal Democrats are ready to deliver that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Cole-Hamilton. We now move to the open debate, the backbench speeches of up to 6 minutes. I call George Adam to be followed by Rachel Hamilton. Mr Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I'm glad to be back. I'm positive for the future for Scotland, and I'm positive about how we can make things better. And it's good to hear from the First Minister when he tells us his positive ideals of how we can make Scotland better, even with the challenges we have to deal with. But the other side of that, and for politics to be better, we need to get something better from the opposition, because the opposition, both Tory and Labour, are extremely negative about absolutely everything. There's no idea of what they're going to do. I think Anas Sarwar's gone from change, because within a year of Labour government there was no change, it just got worse, to his new one seems to be a new direction. Well, all I can say is it seems they've got no direction whatsoever with regards to, because you never hear one thing of what they're going to do and what they're going to try and achieve. And that's what the people want to hear. The public want to know what you're doing as government, how you're achieving things. They don't want to listen to the spin from Labour and the spin from Tory. They want to hear real issues and real ideas coming to fruition. The First Minister was quite right to remind us, as we came into this session, we were going through the endgame with COVID and how difficult that was. Even when we came into this chamber, we were all still a metre apart from one another. This chamber, for the first year, did not operate the way it should have. So to anyone to say, to just brush off the idea of coming out of COVID is complete and utter nonsense, because that is a challenge for any government, and one that everywhere else in the world is dealing with as well. And he mentioned Ukraine and Gaza and the genocide that's happening in Gaza. And see, for those that say that the Scottish Parliament should not talk about what's going on in Gaza, I say to them, take a long, hard look at yourself, and what kind of person are you when you can see what is happening over in that country and you do not want to talk about that when you've got an opportunity as a politician to talk about that? You need to take a look at yourself to actually move on. Scotland has a voice. Scotland has a role in the world, and that's what we in the SNP are all about. The First Minister was quite right. What's happened over the summer period about the demonisation of some in the communities is absolutely disgraceful and needs to be called out. We've seen this before in history, when those in the right actually attack minority groups. They've done it before. It's a game plan that they use all the time. That should be called out at every single occasion. And that brings me to the fact that as we move forward in this year towards the election, Presiding Officer, it's no surprise that I come from Paisley, but myself and my fellow buddies speak in a pretty plain and straight manner. There's no airs and graces, and I'll give you a story that's connected to the way we think and do things. Is the fact I remember a while ago I was doing the Paisley 10K and I was walking through, at this stage, through Fergusley Park. And a woman in her garden articulated her point of view to me about the fact that I wasn't running and I should run a bit faster. She motivated me. I can't use the language, Presiding Officer, that she used because parliamentary protocol wouldn't allow me, but she motivated to move forward, because we don't dress it up in Paisley. We tell it how it is. We always look for the solutions to the challenges and problems. If a wain is hungry, you feed it. If the house is cold, you heat it. If something's broken, you fix it. It's the way our town and our people in my area have been thinking all their days. And I can't be anyone that doesn't think that way or work that way. There are difficulties, there are challenges, but you've got to find a way to make that solution, and that's what makes you relevant when you're speaking to the public. You know, looking at the job in hand and getting on with that job. Now, compare all this to Westminster. When people say we need help, Westminster doesn't find a solution or try to solve the issue. They don't find ways to help, feed, heat or fix. They point, they shout, and they hope nobody notices the mess they've left and made. They blame each other, they blame others, they blame those that can't defend themselves, the easy target, like a typical bully. What we see at the moment is action here in Scotland and distraction in Westminster. That's the fundamental difference. I'm not interested in playing Westminster's type of game, but I'm interested in what delivers for the people of Paisley and Scotland. That's what's important to me and should be important to every single person in this chamber. And for me, the major difference is our SNP Scottish Government is focused on the four big things: ending child poverty, growing the economy, investing in public services and tackling the climate emergency. They're not slogans, they're not soundbites, it's actual hard work done by our hard-working Scottish Government and done for actual people. Take child poverty. Over 326,000 children supported through Scottish Child Payment. That's more money into families' pockets. Meanwhile, Westminster still clinging to their cruel two-child cap, a policy so daft their own backbenchers can't even back it. Scotland's government has actually given £1 billion so far to families that need it, whereas Westminster offers nothing but austerity. Scotland is bucking the trend while the UK is stuck in reverse gear. Makes you wonder what the actual point of the UK is. Our economy in Scotland's outperformed the UK again. We're top for inward investment outside London. We've tripled green jobs since 2021. And while we're building an economy for the future, Westminster's running an economic circus. Presiding Officer, when it comes to the problem with climate, Westminster is actually still can't decide if climate change is a real thing or just another culture war to fight on GB News. I can't be bothered with that nonsense. So the choice is simple. You stick with Westminster or you look to the future and build a future with an independent Scotland where the Scottish people make the decisions for Scotland.
Thank you. Just to advise the Chamber we are well over time. At this stage I am going to keep members to their time limits. I call Rachel Hamilton to be followed by Claire Hoggy. Up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The topic today before us is Scotland's priorities, and I'm sure we'll all contest exactly what they are. Each party will put forward its own interpretation of the issues that deserve the most attention, but in truth, the priorities of most Scots have not changed in the 18 years since the SNP came to power. The things that mattered most to people then still matter the most to them now. And the overwhelming majority of the public do not care about fringe obsessions like gender. They don't see independence as a big issue that needs action. Yes, I'll take an intervention.
Christine Graham, briefly.
I'm sure the member would agree with me. One of the great achievements, not just of the SNP but of this Parliament, was the Borders Railway celebrating 10 years on Saturday. So there have been things delivering for the people of Scotland.
Rachel Hamilton.
I very much look forward to joining Christine Graham next week to celebrate the 10th anniversary. I've always been a supporter. So people don't sit at home and discuss small-time things like pardons for witches, unless, of course, they're saying, can you believe that Hollywood actually spoke about these such things? What people want, as Russell Finlay said, is basic common sense. That's what they wanted in 2007, and it's what they need now, Presiding Officer, because in 18 years of SNP rule, they haven't got it. They did or didn't, not sure, didn't get it under Alex Salmond, Nicola Sturgeon or Humza Yousaf. And they're not getting it under John Swinney either, the man who has been sitting around the cabinet table for all of one of those 18 years. John Swinney, who was the right-hand man for almost all of his predecessors' time in office, and who represents very much more of the same, Presiding Officer, the same SNP pretendy way that has let Scotland down for decades. And he won't do anything about Scotland's top priorities, because he never has. If he does finally want to change course and do things differently, as he's been promising today, then Scotland's top priority, just like it was in 2008, is a thriving and growing economy, because we know that a prosperous economy is the key to increasing the tax revenues and providing more investment for the much-needed improvement in public services. Without higher economic growth, we'll never have the funds to reduce the NHS waiting list that I was intervening on the First Minister earlier about, or investing in more teachers and sorting out the attainment gap that others have been intervening on earlier. It's a crucial bedrock on which everything else is built. But under the SNP, it's way down the list of their priorities. On the Nationalist Watch, businesses don't feel that they have a say in what happens. Barely any companies think that the government understands their business. Companies are regularly disadvantaged compared to their competitors south of the border, especially when the SNP refused to pass on hundreds of millions of pounds of business rate relief provided by the UK government. For a few years, the SNP even brought down into government a party that doesn't believe in economic growth, who sees it as a bad thing. And it was the First Minister who infamously helped to negotiate that deal to bring the extreme Greens into government. The Greens might be gone, presiding officer, but their influence remains, and the SNP have been pursuing the same disastrous approach for years now. Higher taxes, more regulation, taking more of people's hard-earned money and providing less in return, limiting innovation and curtailing opportunities. I'll take the intervention.
Fergus Ewing, briefly.
Does Rachel Hamilton agree that the windfall tax must be either abolished or substantially reduced? Otherwise, we will see that industry die before our very eyes.
Phil Hamilton.
Very grateful to Fergus Ewing for the intervention, because I know that he is a huge advocate for North East oil and gas sector, as are the Scottish Conservatives. We know that if we do not give the extraction licences, get the oil and gas out of the ground, that it will be more unaffordable for people who have less in their pockets to spend, and their household bills are going up, their energy bills are going up. It's a very important issue to support the North East oil and gas sector. But things need to change, and they need to change fast, presiding officer. The SNP must do things differently, put our economy at the top of the agenda, and that's why my party will call for, and where we will stand in the months ahead, for a renewed focus on effective spending, for innovators to be encouraged to start and to grow businesses, for more high-quality jobs to be brought to Scotland. On the point that Fergus Ewing makes, for those thousands of jobs in the North East to be protected so that they can transition as we move to that net zero target. But they have the skills and they have the experience and the knowledge. We want less red tape for businesses. It's not us saying that, it's the businesses that are saying that. We don't want people wasting their time filling out paperwork. For the expansion of opportunities to ambitious and aspirational Scots, that the SNP are not meeting their expectations right now, for lower bills, as I've just mentioned, so families can decide how to spend more of their own money. And by putting our economy first, there'll be more revenue to give to the education system and to increase our rankings in the International League. I don't have much more time, do I, presiding officer? So I'll bring it to a close. But to summarise, our economy, our education system, our NHS cannot tolerate any more of this failing SNP government. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hamilton. I now call Claire Hockey to be followed by Pam Duncan-Glancy. Up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, presiding officer. Today, too many households are still struggling with the cost of food, energy bills and everyday essentials. Decisions taken at Westminster continue to make life more difficult for families, communities and businesses across the country. They've faced years of austerity, a hard Brexit that has been imposed in Scotland, and completely and utterly catastrophic economic mismanagement by successive UK governments. No doubt my colleagues on the right in the chamber will again try to distance themselves from the billions of pounds of cuts made by their UK Labour colleagues. But let me set the scene by giving a quick rundown of just some of their greatest hits. From refusing to end the two-child benefit cap, pushing more children into poverty, blocking compensation for WASPy women, slashing international aid, trying to introduce billions of pounds worth of cuts to disabled people, and imposing a tax on jobs and public services by hiking employer national insurance contributions. The pockets of the young, The poor, the disabled and the elderly have been raided under Labour. And speculation is mounting that the Chancellor is set to announce another wave of tax rises and spending cuts. We're only just into September and I'm already hearing from constituents who are worried about yet another rise in energy bills. These are the same constituents who had Labour leaflets pushed through their door promising their bills would go down by £300. Now, I'm going to expand on one of these points today, child poverty. And, Presiding Officer, the persistence of child poverty is testament to how families across the UK and Scotland as a whole have been absolutely failed by Westminster. It should be a mark of shame on the Labour government that child poverty is rising in the rest of the UK and expected to hit record highs by the end of this Westminster Parliament session. Meanwhile, in Scotland, the First Minister has said that the eradication of child poverty is the single most important objective, and the Scottish Government is taking action and turning the tide. Organisations such as the Joseph Rowntree Foundation have highlighted SNP policies like the Scottish Child Payment and the mitigation of the two-child limit as ones which see Scotland bucking the trend. And research led by Professor Ruth Patrick shows that the Labour Westminster Government could cut child poverty in the UK by a sixth if they were to match Scotland's investment in social security. That represents 700,000 children lifted out of poverty overnight. You've got to ask the question, what's stopping them? The progress that Scotland has made on driving poverty rates down shows another way is possible if the political will is there. Last week I visited Rutherglen and Cambuslang Food Bank in my constituency to meet the new manager and to learn more about their upcoming move. And with that visit and today's debate in mind, I was very interested to read a report the Trussell Trust commissioned from the Fraser of Allender Institute on the Scottish Child Payment. The Trussell Trust have also praised the payment as an example of how an important lever for reducing the need for food banks by lifting families out of deep poverty that leads to their youth. This report found evidence that the Scottish Child Payment successfully reduced food bank usage for single adult households with children, households with 3 or more children and those with children aged 5 to 16. And while this research was exploratory in nature, the results are very promising and give us reason for optimism for when larger data sets are available. We're talking here about breaking cycles of deep poverty, allowing families not just to pay for essential items and live with more dignity and freedom, but to participate in more opportunities and to thrive. In South Lanarkshire, where my Rutherglen constituency is based, over 20,000 children and young people are actively benefiting from the Scottish Child Payment. Over 21,500 received Best Start grant and Best Start food payments. These are families in our communities who are getting money directly in their pockets, easing their household pressures. This is what tackling child poverty head-on looks like. And while Labour continues to sit in its hands at Westminster, refusing to reverse the cruel two-child cap, widely recognised as one of the biggest drivers of child poverty, the SNP has taken action to effectively scrap the cruel policy in Scotland from next March. With the powers available to us via this Parliament, as the SNP government is taking action to keep more money in people's pockets through these tough times. And whether we're talking about social security support only available in Scotland, the expansion of free school meals, funded childcare worth £6,000 per year, free prescriptions and eye appointments, free tuition fees, free bus travel for 2.3 million people, or scrapping peak rail fares, this is making a difference to families across the country. This SNP government are saving people money, and the UK government is doing nothing to help people in our communities with soaring bills. This is a story of action versus distraction, and the SNP have chosen action, demonstrating what happens when decisions for Scotland can be and are made in Scotland. Presiding Officer, as an independent nation, we could do so much more, and that's what the SNP is fighting for. And through our actions and our vision over the next year, we will show that independence is the fresh start that Scotland needs.
Thank you. And I call Pam Duncan-Glancy to be followed by Jackie Damar. Up to 6 minutes. Ms Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to debate Scotland's priorities today. eradicating child poverty, confronting the climate emergency, growing a stronger economy and sustaining high-quality public services are ambitions shared across this chamber. But the real test is not whether these aims are worthy, but whether they are being delivered. The sad reality is, Presiding Officer, they are not, and the people of Scotland know it. The SNP has had nearly 2 decades to lift children out of poverty, yet persistent child poverty is up. They've had 2 decades to confront the climate emergency, but they've missed their climate targets. They've had 2 decades to grow the economy, but they've overseen huge skills gaps needed to do that. And they've had 2 decades to sustain high-quality public services, yet the NHS waiting lists are leaving people in agony for years, teachers are leaving the profession, pupils are being failed, and colleges are on their knees. This government had £5.2 billion in additional funding this year, yet people's lives are not getting better. We're in the midst of a housing emergency, felt keenly in Glasgow. NHS waiting lists have created a 2-tier system, with those who can afford to pay having to go private. And the SNP have wasted billions of pounds of public money through incompetence and bureaucracy and stood by while school standards have declined. And, Presiding Officer, it's in education where we can see the potential of Scotland. It is in schools and our education system where we change life chances, celebrate achievement and deliver opportunity for all. But sadly in Scotland, it is also where we see the impact of a catastrophic failure of our government distracted and failing to open opportunity for all of Scotland's young people. The work our teachers, lecturers and support staff do from the early years through to lifelong learning, additional support in apprenticeships, in universities and in colleges can transform lives, reduce poverty and deliver the Scotland we all want. And the message from them, from families, from young people and staff is simple. Get the basics right and give us a fighting chance and we can and will flourish. But this government have failed to do that. If the government are to deliver what they say in their motion today are their priorities, these must be matched by real outcomes in classrooms, campuses and workplaces across Scotland. Presiding Officer, ministers came to office saying education was their #1 priority. Yet thousands of young people are being held back as the poverty-related attainment gap persists, with data showing the gap between our most and least deprived pupils remains stark, around 20 percentage points in primary. And you're still less likely to get a National 5 or an advanced higher if you come from a poorer background. This government is failing pupils in our poorest communities. Some primary ones starting in recent weeks are already behind before they have even found their peg. And attendance is too low, because whilst the government have tinkered around the edges to address it, the reality is they have failed to tackle the fundamentals that lock young people out of school. The fact that classroom violence is rising because pupils and staff do not feel supported or backed. The support, the scaffolding around them has been broken. Long waits for CAMS, no pathways to support for neurodiversity, and teacher workloads is seeing teachers leave the profession. And despite what the government tell us, teacher numbers are nowhere near what they should be in key subjects and localities, leaving children short of opportunities. All the while, many teachers are out of work. Support staff are stretched to breaking point, and whilst inclusion is promised, support is rationed. Colleges, which should be our regional engines of opportunity, are being asked to do more with less, while employers warn of a skills gap that holds growth back and the mission to meet the transition to net zero. With enrolments falling, funding squeezed and capital budgets cut in real terms, I say to the First Minister and his team, Scotland cannot close its skills gaps by shrinking the institutions that train our workforce or our young people. This is not focus. This is drift, managed, or as some have said, unmanaged decline. Devolution gives real powers over schools, skills, colleges, universities, childcare and much more. But the government have failed to grasp the opportunity it brings. But Scots see through it. They need leadership, a government that shares their ambitions and that works relentlessly to deliver the services that they deserve. Put simply, we need a government back in the service of the people of Scotland again. And, Presiding Officer, At the election in May, people in Scotland can have that with Scottish Labour and a new direction. A government focused on investing in our future by ensuring that every child in every community can believe that success belongs to them. A government that does more than a motion. A government with ambition for all of our young people, with a plan from cradle to career to match it and deliver it. A plan that builds strong skills in literacy, oracy and numeracy. A plan that delivers a knowledge-rich curricula, world-leading digital and STEM capability, creativity, and a skills system that delivers for young people, career changers and employers, with colleges, universities and educators at its heart. Ambition for school staff that sees action to reduce teacher workloads and that properly matches jobs with newly qualified teachers. A government with ambition for safe and thriving schools, with solid action on behaviour and attendance and proper support for pupils with ASN. Scotland's young people need a government with ambition for families and action to remove barriers and deliver affordable childcare that works for working families. Ambition and action in all of those areas is how we deliver opportunity for young people, and those are the priorities of Scotland's people, and they will be the priorities of a Scottish Labour government. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. I now call Jackie Dunbar to be followed by Craig Hoy. Up to 6 minutes, Ms Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. After a long recess away from Parliament, it's good to be back talking about our priorities and about what matters to my constituents and to the folk across Scotland. The Scottish Government has 4 key priorities: eradicating child poverty, tackling the climate emergency, growing the economy and sustaining public services. And in Aberdeen, you can see how those 4 priorities are interlinked and are combining to provide one single clear direction for the future of our city and our country. So let me talk them through in turn. The value of giving every child the best start in life and eradicating child poverty is something that you would think would be clear for everyone to see. You would think. Because if you truly want to protect children, then you start by protecting them from poverty. But instead, we have a Labour government that is still persevering with a 2-child cap that is forcing thousands of our bairns to go to bed at night hungry. Thank goodness that in Scotland we will take a different path, and this government will abolish the 2-child cap. And with that, alongside the baby box, the Scottish Child Payment, Best Start grants, 1,140 hours of childcare a year, and a continued investment in our nurseries and schools, we are ensuring that every child gets the best start in life. The second priority is about the climate emergency, and some may say that's the world that these young folk will inherit. But in Aberdeen, Europe's energy capital, the future net zero capital of the world, the journey to net zero has already started, and it is already impacting on folks' lives. Many young folk have a parent who work in the energy industry, and when they grow up, if those jobs aren't there, then there's a big question mark about what jobs there will be. The third priority is growing the economy, and for Aberdeen, as I've already alluded to, the energy sector is our biggest economy. Thousands of folk in our city work for energy companies. Thousands more work in the supply chain, and the money they spend supports a high proportion of other local jobs. For decades, the fortunes of Aberdeen have risen and fallen with oil prices, and throughout that time, we have looked at what a future without oil and gas might look like, because whether it's phased out, forced out, or it runs out, there will come a point in time when Aberdeen no longer has an oil and gas industry. But being home to a workforce that is so highly skilled does offer us a golden opportunity to establish ourselves as a net zero capital. I'll take a quick intervention, but time is very tight.
Very grateful. The SNP's draft energy strategy maintains its presumption against new oil and gas. Does the member support that presumption?
Jackie Dunbar.
I am talking about the offshore, the energy industry in Aberdeen, and you've gone off topic just slightly. The climate crisis and the efforts to tackle it will affect everyone, but with the right investment and support, Aberdeen will lead Scotland and the world in the move to net zero. As I'm standing here just now, over 30,000 industry professionals and our own Deputy First Minister are attending the Offshore Europe Conference in my Aberdeen Donside constituency. The focus of that event is the future of the energy industry, and it is a priority for all of us, especially those of us in the North East. Presiding Officer, the motion talks about being hampered by the policy decisions of the UK Government. The North East and the energy industry is probably the clearest example of where they are getting it wrong. Far too quick to announce a windfall tax only for energy companies. Far too quick to increase it. Far too quick to remove investment incentives, while it has taken far too long to back and invest in the Acorn project. I suspect we'll be waiting a very long time to see any meaningful amount of jobs created within GB Energy. And the UK Government has utterly failed to take any meaningful action to save energy jobs in Scotland, be that across the North East or at Grangemouth. The Scottish Government has stepped up, not just with the £500 million Just Transition Fund, but also with a range of local investments, such as the millions they have committed to Aberdeen's first Green Academy building in Hazelhead, which conveniently ties in with all of the Scottish Government's priorities. But moving on to our fourth and final priority of delivering and sustaining good quality public services. I grew up with the idea that a welfare state would support me from the cradle to grave. While that's been eroded by 15 years of austerity, it is still worth fighting for, and I'm pleased that the Scottish Government is delivering in that same spirit. From baby boxes and best starts to funeral support payments and everything in between. From free university, free doctor appointments and a helping hand when folk have their own children. So those are the Scottish Government's priorities, and I can see the difference it makes to people's lives as they work towards and deliver on those priorities every day. In contrast, I'm not so sure what the UK Government's priorities are, and I'm unsure if Keir Starmer does either. But I can see what the UK has delivered for people: a proliferation of food banks, record levels of inequality, reduced opportunities, Brexit, attempts to sow division, and 2 decades of wage stagnation. I'm looking forward to folk getting the choice between a Scottish Government that is focused on delivering for them and a broken Britain that looks to be in its dying days. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. I now call Craig Hoy to be followed by Sarah Boyack. Up to 6 minutes. Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. This debate serves to show one thing and one thing only, namely that despite the opportunity for self-reflection and a reset over the summer, the First Minister and his government have learnt no lessons at all. Because we return to Parliament today and the SNP's first act, sadly and predictably, is to press for independence. But over the summer I've spoken to residents on doorsteps and in surgeries from Aberlady to Sanquhar. And let me tell the First Minister, who's just left the chamber, this: independence was not a priority for a single person out there in the real world that I spoke to. But now we know that between now and the election we will be locked in this downward and depressing spiral of constitutional debate, because this is a distraction by a discredited First Minister who has not offered one single effective solution to the problems that his government has created and which are getting worse by the day. Mr Swinney's priority, I'm afraid to say, and he isn't here, but I will repeat it if he gets back in, I'm afraid is now a dwindling band of nationalist diehards who grow shriller and shriller as each month passes. But let's offer a reality check to Mr Swinney and to his colleagues, because we do so because the real priorities of the people out in the country are very different to those of his government. Rather than obsessing on gender issues, people would like his government to fix the NHS. 1 in 6 Scots are still languishing on an NHS waiting list, stretching primary care to breaking point. People also want more money, more of their own money in their own pocket. Instead, taxes are sky high, with hard-pressed Scots being bled dry with £1.7 billion in additional income taxes that are resulting in behavioural change and damaging the Scottish economy. And driving on Scotland's roads, particularly our rural roads, areas forgotten about by the SNP, are now increasingly like driving on the surface of the moon. And worse still, the failure to upgrade key roads such as the A75 is putting lives and livelihoods at risk. And what of Ivan McKee's commitment to public sector reform, which is apparently a priority, and right on cue Mr McKee arrives in the chamber. He said when he announced his public sector reform plan earlier this year that it was rooted in realism. He said it was not done, and I quote, in a headline-grabbing way that simply throws out random targets based on no evidence. Yet we now know from an FOI request that Mr McKee's policy is a sham. Civil servants warned him that there are significant caveats, and I quote, limitations on the figures underpinning the very challenging target he set. These included, they went on, inconsistencies in how public bodies had self-reported their previous spending activity, compounded by a light-touch verification system. And his own Directorate for Public Service Reform warned him of this in May when it said there is not a specific breakdown of the £1 billion target and there is an element of risk in this approach. And we also found out that in May the Cabinet Secretaries raised what they said were considerable concerns with the Minister, but today Shona Robertson could shed no light on what those specific concerns were. So, in short, I'm short on time on this occasion, so I won't. So, in short, well, I will briefly.
Ivan McKee, Minister.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just to let them know, yeah, of course there's risk, but we're going to deliver on it, right? Yes, there are challenges, but we are going to deliver on it. And yes, the number is rooted in reality, which is based on the data we collected, and it's 20% of that number. That's what we're going to deliver on. So you might want to sit there and stand there and say that we've got problems and challenges. It's not going to happen, but I'll let him know we're committed to it. We are going to deliver on it, and everybody's committed to making that happen.
Craig Hoy.
Mr knows only too well that it's not rooted in reality. It's written on the back of a fag packet to get him through the next Scottish parliamentary election. And if his own officials and his own colleagues don't believe there is a plan, then why should the country have any faith in his proposals? And isn't the truth of the matter that facing a £5 billion budget black hole created by SNP ministers by 2030, the government is now clutching at straws to get themselves through next year's election? And isn't the reality is that to pay for their bloated public sector and welfare bill, ministers will have to make very, very tough decisions. And while they won't tell you this now, this means huge tax increases or massive public spending cuts if the SNP is re-elected next May. Deputy Presiding Officer, over the course of the summer, I knocked on thousands of doors across Dumfriesshire. And let me tell the First Minister and the Scottish Government this. People who care little for the south of Scotland, nor for regions that do not vote for the SNP. Let me tell them what the Scottish people's real priorities are. Tackling long waits in our NHS, fixing our roads and providing certainty to farmers who are scared witless by Labour's family farm tax. And I say to the First Minister and the Government and the SNP backbenches, on immigration, they could not be further away from the views of real people, the ordinary Scots that I spoke to over the summer. Many of the local people that I spoke to live with the reality of an asylum hotel, the Mercure in Dumfries, on their doorstep. It's not, as it is for the First Minister, an abstract matter to them. It's what they live with day to day. It has changed the character of their community, and not for the better. And we need a government that focuses on the needs of communities like those in Dumfriesshire and not allowing more and more people into our country in breach of the law. Britain, Deputy Presiding Officer, is our home, not a hotel for those trying to enter this country illegally. But sadly, for this SNP government, this First Minister and this self-indulgent Parliament, they will simply not understand that.
I now call Sarah Boyack to be followed by Ben McPherson. Up to 6 minutes, Ms Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First of all, can I draw members' attention to my register of interest re my former employment? I want to focus today on the missed opportunities and how the SNP is letting down people in my area. As ever, we heard the blame today, even though our new Labour government allocated that government an extra £5.2 billion in Barnett consequentials. That's real money that should be making a real difference to people's lives, but it is not being delivered where it's needed because of the SNP's waste of money. And we've pushed them so hard to focus on the day job. We saw it with the iPavilion, where after huge public pressure, they were forced into a U-turn. We saw it again in peak fairs, where once more they had to U-turn after pressure by Labour MSPs. But our constituents, remember the debates, colleagues, it's on the official report, our constituents deserve better than government by U-turn. They deserve government by delivery, whether it's our NHS, with massive waiting times for 900,000 people, or in my constituency, the lack of access to CAM services, which is massively impacting on young people, and the failure to deliver an educational attainment cited by Pam Duncan-Glancy. And I thought that Mark Griffin's response to today's housing statement was spot on. While we welcome more investment, it is too little, too late, because we're still in a housing emergency with a lack of affordable, accessible housing. It's unacceptable that over 9,000 children will still be in unsuitable accommodation. And I thought it was really significant today that the Cabinet Secretary did not directly answer Ben Macpherson's question about Edinburgh's housing emergency. Our constituents desperately need to see more support for our councils, our housing associations, housing co-ops to build the affordable, accessible housing we desperately need. And we're not seeing... Yes, I'll take a brief intervention.
Briefly, Ben Macpherson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Sarah Boyd, with Mary McCallum not in the chamber, I think it's important to put on the record that the Cabinet Secretary did actually respond, saying that there would be targeted spending in areas of high pressure like Edinburgh.
Sarah Boyd.
Yes, but we didn't get the targets. We didn't get the accountability because for years we've had a lack of building in Edinburgh that means people are leaving the city and going to East Lothian, Mid Lothian, West Lothian because they simply can't afford housing in the city. And the lack of affordable housing, it means that rents have been rocketing and are simply unaffordable. So we need that urgent action, and we did not get the commitments, the detailed financial commitments we needed today. And it's deeply disappointing. I want to focus on the climate emergency because those targets were dumped because the SNP had not done the heavy lifting to meet them. And the climate emergency is not abstract. It's impacting on people's lives now. Flooding is disrupting rail services, damaging people's homes and communities. And last week, a damning report from Audit Scotland warned that the Scottish Government is failing to allocate the investment needed to make our communities safe from flooding. Over the last decade, costs have trebled, and local authorities now need clarity and certainty on funding, because the risk of flooding is increasing because of extreme weather. Coastal communities are vulnerable, as are homes in floodplains and beside rivers. There are 280,000 homes in Scotland currently at risk. And then there's the growing risk of wildfires. It's horrific what's happening across Europe, in Greece, in Spain, in Portugal. But we're also seeing wildfires here in Scotland. This summer, we had a fire that burned for several days in Uphall and West Lothian. Last month, we had a serious fire in Holyrood Park that lasted for days. It's thought that the fire was the result of human activity, so yes, we need to raise awareness of risk. But awareness alone is not enough. People also need to know that their emergency services will be there for them when disaster strikes. And that's why we need the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service properly resourced to deal with the new risks of fires and flooding. Rural and urban communities need more community capacity, not cuts, because the time it takes firefighters to arrive can make the difference between life and death. So it makes no sense to close Marianville Fire Station, just over a mile from this Parliament, an area where there's 3,500 new homes. Major developments at Leith Ports, where Marianville is the station responsible for tackling fires in the Holyrood Park. Closing Marianville would leave families and businesses more exposed to risk. It makes no sense to close that station. But it's another example of SNP government cuts not delivering the services our constituents urgently need. We need a government focused on delivery, not wasting their money through bad decision-making, whether it's the failed National Stair Service, which wasted millions but created not a single job, the lack of job created in Scotland on ferries, buses or renewables. If we're going to see a fair transition, we need good quality jobs in Scotland now. There was such an irony in John Swinney saying his government doesn't have the powers they need, given the massive missed opportunities with our renewables in ScotWind, the opportunities for creating more jobs in our communities, for community, cooperative or municipally owned heat and power companies. We need to see the recommendations from the Just Transition Commission acted on. We need action in the North East. We need action in our ports and harbours, because the SNP promised to create 130,000 green jobs. Hasn't happened. Publicly owned energy system they didn't create, but we can see GB Energy getting on with the job. Investment in community energy projects. We cannot afford another SNP government of excuses and U-turns. We need a government of delivery, a government that will only come with a Scottish Labour government. Thank you.
Thank you. We now come to the final speaker in the open debate. I call Ben Macpherson. Up to 6 minutes, Mr Macpherson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. After a long recess, coming into Parliament today, it was even more striking to me, and I'm sure it was to other colleagues, just what a privilege it is to come and be able to speak and express ourselves in this place on behalf of those we serve. They expect us to bring solutions and positive vision, especially at a time, as the First Minister said, when we're 25 years into this Parliament's history, a quarter of the way into the 21st century, and in a period of multiple challenges at home and across the world. And therefore, I'm actually, honestly, dismayed and shocked at just the absolute lack of depth of solutions from the opposition benches. When I listened to both opposition leaders speak, I didn't hear one idea, one worked-out policy, one thing that was constructive. These are tough times that the people we represent are experiencing. We all know that. And they expect us to do what we're sent here to do, which is come up with ways that make a difference for them. And that's exactly what the First Minister set out to Parliament and what the Scottish Government is focused on. Because yes, there are challenges, but there are multiple successes to be welcoming of too. I didn't hear any opposition MSP raise the really good results that our school pupils achieved across the country, or the fact that more people from less privileged backgrounds are going to university. I didn't hear them say that we had a remarkable summer of culture and festivities, particularly here in the capital, where people poured in from around the world and spoke positively about our country thereafter. I didn't hear any praise for our remarkable police force and the fact that they managed all of those events and a presidential visit and a vice-presidential visit extremely, extremely well. I didn't hear any comment about the fact that waiting times, the standard has been met for the third time in a row, as was announced today. I didn't hear that Scotland's NHS Scotland have a 5-year high for operations, the record number of hip and knee replacements performed by our NHS. There is more to do, as the First Minister said, but there is much achieved. And we need to get to a position with all the challenge in our country where people can look to this place and see people speaking with passion about ideas to make things better and being constructive about what has been done well. Because those who are just trying to talk our country down and chip our society away, they'll be absolutely delighted in what the opposition parties have put to Parliament today, because it's empty. No ideas. Anna Sauer, you may shake your head when you get on your feet shortly. Or, pardon me, Presiding Officer, if Anna Sauer gets on his feet later this week, come out with some constructive solutions. Yeah. And also, when the opposition parties speak, they talk as if Scotland already has all the powers of an independent nation. They talk as if there wasn't a Conservative government that made disastrous decisions for many, many years. They talk as if there wasn't a coalition between the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives that put the worst austerity in this country and Europe in the 21st century. They talk as if the Labour government's done everything perfectly over the years, and we all know that that's not the case. Because there is so much more that we can do, but we need to do it together and be honest. Because take the NHS. You know, the opposition make criticism, but think about what we could do if we had a migration policy in Scotland, or if we hadn't been taken out of the EU against our will, and how things would be better. When it comes to the economy, imagine if we could reverse or didn't have that NI increase, or we could do more with VAT to support the hospitality sector, or we could do more with other aspects of the taxation system. That would help us make a difference. That's why the Constitution matters. Think about energy. It was talked about earlier about redirecting renewable wealth into communities. Energy policy is reserved. So, that's why the Constitution matters and more powers matters. It talked about poverty alleviation. Imagine if we didn't have to Imagine if we didn't have to mitigate against the two-child cap and spend money on that, and mitigate against the bedroom tax and spend money on that. Imagine if we could make all of the welfare policy here in Scotland in a more sensible and thoughtful way to reduce poverty even further. And of course, we're making good progress compared with elsewhere in the UK, as has already been said. There's so much more that could be said of why the Constitution matters. And as much as the opposition and others want to chip away and tear things down, I can feel there's a resistant optimism developing in Scotland. And I'm proud that this SNP government is part of the pushback against the negativity. And yes, we will talk about hope. Yes, we will talk about how we make things better. And yes, we will talk about the Constitution being relevant in that space. More and more people are seeing independence as the space where Scotland would be able to achieve its full potential. It is becoming the settled will more and more. And those who dismiss it as an aspiration, those who dismiss statehood, you need to remember that you're talking about 50% of the people that we represent. Their opinions matter. And the question very soon will be, what are the opposition and Westminster going to do to facilitate their will?
We now come to closing speeches. I call first Jamie Green, up to 6 minutes. Mr Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I first of all welcome the presence of Ruth Maguire back to the Chamber after her absence. It's good to see her here. And also, can I take the opportunity to thank the constituent who wrote to me congratulating me on taking over the Green Party. I'm very grateful for your email, but I think I've done enough bench moving this year. Listening to the First Minister today, I was really struck by a sense of déjà vu, because I've listened to this debate some 9 years in a row. But, the big difference this year in the First Minister's speech, that it took him 14 minutes to utter the word independence, and even then it was just once, which I think in itself is quite telling of the direction of travel of the SNP. But here's what we did not hear. Here's what we did not hear but should have heard from the speakers from the governing party today. We didn't hear from them, but we did from opposition, that for the 7th year in a row, Scotland has the highest number of drug deaths in Europe. We didn't hear that 25 of them were in Inverclyde alone. These people are my neighbours. These people are my friends of friends. We didn't hear from the government benches about the 8,000 cancellations on the Gurk to Dunoon ferry in this last 2 years. We didn't hear about Ferguson Marine, the fact it was overlooked for ferry contracts to yards in Poland and Turkey, which we are now seeing delays to as well. We didn't hear about the 2,000 people, 2,000, that's more than the entire population of Howard in my region, who are stuck in a hospital bed due to delayed discharge. They're in hospital, but they should be at home, and we all know it. Of course, none of this comes as any surprise to me, because we all know that care homes are closing right across Scotland, left, right and centre. 10,000 people are waiting for a social care assessment in Scotland right now. We didn't hear from the government benches about the nearly 1 million people stuck on an outpatient, inpatient or diagnostic appointment waiting list. Some for years. Years of worry, years of pain and years of distress. Presiding Officer, some people will die waiting. We didn't hear about the psychiatric patients discharged from hospital, often at their most vulnerable point in life, who waited a year for critical follow-up care. One example, in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, waited 330 days to be seen after leaving hospital. Yes, all that might sound a bit parochial, and yes, all that might sound overly negative, but all politics is local, and that is the reality of too many people and too many of our constituents. Because, believe it or not, very few people in my region lie awake at night wondering about the many constitutional arguments which occupy so much airtime in this chamber. They lie awake at night because they're in pain. They lie awake at night because they're waiting on a new knee or hip. They lie awake at night because they're stuck in temporary accommodation, wondering why on earth they cannot find a permanent home for them and their children. They lie awake at night in the back streets of our Glasgow city, addicted to drugs and desperate for help, and many of them will not wake the next day. That is our national shame. It's not just a national shame on this government, it's a national shame on this entire Parliament. They lie awake at night staring at their spreadsheets, wondering why footfall to their island is down this year. They wonder if their business will survive another winter, and they wonder which member staff they might have to lay off to balance the books. Now, Ben McPherson said he wants solutions. I agree, actually. I want to hear constructive solutions from all parties. All parties have good ideas. But people are fed up, and I don't blame them. But here's my biggest fear, and here's why I do find genuine consensus in some of the comments that have been made this afternoon. My biggest fear is that voters will respond to their overall loss of faith in politics and politicians by finding solace in the fringes of populist politics, in politicians who will promise them the earth but deliver nothing but grievance, division and community discontent. Because divide and conquer, as their strategy seems to be, will deliver temporary electoral results, but it also risks fracturing the good nature of Scots. And I think that is something that we cannot let happen as a Parliament. Because I haven't got much time, apologies. Because let me say, refugees are not the reason you cannot get a GP appointment on that 8 a.m. queue. Let me say the LGBT community is not the reason that domestic violence is on the up in Scotland. There are other reasons. And it's about time we stop scapegoating people who already have faced so much adversity in life to get to where they are. And I make no apologies for saying that. Look, I understand governing is difficult. It's about priorities. I understand there's never been an endless pot of cash. I understand the economic difficulties of being in government and having to make those decisions. But taxpayers do want and deserve value for money. They expect good public services. They expect their Parliament to debate these issues with gravity and sensitivity. They expect their politicians to work constructively when it's required, but also disagree respectfully when it is necessary. Of course they want alternatives. Of course they're sick of people bemoaning failures. It is something that is sorely lacking in this place, and that is also government taking and accepting responsibility when they have to. Now, this debate is entitled Scotland's Future. We all want a better future for Scotland, I don't doubt it. But speeches will not deliver a better Scotland. A government that does what it promises will. And whatever the next government of Scotland looks like, it should never forget that. Presiding Officer.
Thank you. I now call Ross Greer up to 6 minutes. Mr Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Excuse me. I want to start off picking up where Ben McPherson finished, because I was disappointed in this debate. It was an opportunity for all parties to set out our priorities and our visions for Scotland. Now, I do think that the Scottish Government in too many cases lacks ambition and bravery, but there is clearly a vision there, one that I can broadly agree with. But what we heard from Labour and the Conservatives this afternoon was a relentlessly negative vision for this country, if vision is even a word that can be used to describe it. If I wasn't convinced beforehand, I'm absolutely convinced now that it is the strategy of both of these parties to simply make people miserable, because they think that is the best way to achieve the results that they want next May. But there's no sense that they would improve the lives of the people of this country. And more importantly, there was no record for them to speak of. This is a minority Scottish Government. A minority government gives every member of this Parliament the opportunity to exercise influence and to deliver on what they believe in. But there was no mention of a record of delivery and achievement from the Labour or Conservative benches, because they have a strategy of preventing progress, more so in this Parliament than they even did in the last one. I can think of no better example of that, Presiding Officer, than on the Housing Bill, where I brought an amendment to end one particular scandal, the scandal of domestic abuse survivors being forced to pay off their abusers' council tax debts. And I want to thank Shirley-Anne Somerville and Paul McClellan for supporting me with that amendment and for the SNP members who voted for it. But Labour and Conservative MSPs voted against that amendment. An amendment to end the scandal of abuse survivors paying their abusers' debts. Why? And then in June, we had the contrived reasons that they came up with to oppose the Education Bill and keep the SQA in place, an organisation that they, like me, have quite rightly railed against for years. But I did, Presiding Officer, try to find something that I could agree with. Russell Finlay at one point complained about an unreformed public sector, and while I probably have very different visions of reform to him, I can agree on the need for reform. I'm sure on that basis, then, that if the report into the pilots of the 4-day working week comes back showing a boost in worker productivity at no additional cost, then we will see that in the Conservative manifesto for next year. But I mean, I don't really believe that, of course, because that would be a policy that would make some people happier. And that is something the Conservatives absolutely cannot see in Scotland. And I would ask my Conservative colleagues, are you not exhausted by this negativity? Are you not exhausted coming here every day to talk down the country that you live in and represent? I said in my opening speech about the need for us to redistribute wealth to deliver the kind of fairer, greener society that I believe the vast majority of people want. And that involves having some difficult conversations, like the one that I had with the Cabinet Secretary for Finance this morning about the small business bonus scheme. I accept the need for us to support small businesses, the lifeblood of Scotland's economy, but the Government's own independent review found that this £250 million scheme had no evidence of positive economic outcomes. So if we are to spend £250 million supporting small businesses every year, I think we need to have a difficult conversation about whether the SBBS in its current form is the way to do that. And it's not the only area of tax where we need to see reform. I think we need to see reform in property taxes. There are too many young people who want to start a family and need a home to do that, but are locked out because of a broken housing market. Well, the King, one of the richest people in this country, is personally exempt from paying land and buildings transaction tax. I know there are many on the government benches who agree with the policies that the Greens have put forward. And under the leadership of myself and Gillian Mackay, we want to work constructively with the government where there is common ground and the opportunity to take this country forward together. Because people want and need politicians on their side, fighting for them. Free bus travel for young people, removing peak rail fares. These were policies that put money in people's pockets, took action to tackle the climate crisis and made life easier for normal people. And it is that kind of progress that's key to securing independence. We need to strain the existing powers of this place, show people the good of self-government. I think it undermines the argument for independence when our existing, limited but existing powers sit unused or underused. Yes, we are doing this with one hand tied behind our back, but we need to play the hand that we've been dealt. And we need to act to fix the everyday problems that people face. Because happy people make for an optimistic society, and I think that is the only way that we will achieve our goal of independence. I want us to strain the limits of devolution. One area where I hope the Scottish Government stretches the limits of devolution tomorrow is in opposing apartheid Israel's genocidal assault on Palestine. I wrote to the First Minister with a package of measures that the Government could deliver within its existing powers to deliver the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign, a campaign that worked against apartheid South Africa and can work against apartheid Israel. Because the Scottish Government's actions in regards to the genocide in Gaza simply do not match their welcome words. In fact, they've taken no actions against the State of Israel. Compare that to Russia, where as soon as Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the Scottish Government urged every business, quite rightly, urged every business in this country to axe all ties, all business links with Russia. Palestinian Scots want to see action from this government because words won't save their family members' lives. If the Scottish Government is willing to be bold, Green MSPs will work with them, because a bold, brave government is exactly what this era of crisis requires.
Thank you. I now call Michael Marr. Again, up to 6 minutes. Mr Marr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Government's motion today invites us to consider Scotland's priorities. And if the SNP ever cared about the priorities of ordinary people, it's clear they have long since lost touch with them. Instead of a functioning NHS, they've brought the health service to its knees. We have more patients waiting over 2 years for treatment in NHS Tayside than we do in the whole of England. The whole of England. Instead of a school system where young people can reach their potential, they presided over declining school standards, and in Dundee they can't even build the primary school they promised 10 years ago. Instead of a thriving economy, they have left us lagging behind other parts of the UK and wasted billions of pounds of taxpayers' money. If the SNP and John Swinney had real ideas about how to fix the mess that they have made, we would have seen them by now. But of course none of this is what John Swinney and the SNP want to talk about. They know their legislative achievements are meagre and their record in government is one of demonstrable failure. Instead, John Swinney is reaching for the independence panic button, not about building out, but about narrowing in. These are not the priorities of the ordinary people across Scotland who are working ever harder and getting ever less in return from their government. John Swinney does know this, and the next 8 months, unfortunately, he will put the SNP election strategy before the good of the country. Because the First Minister began the debate today by talking about blame. A preferable term might be responsibility, Presiding Officer, and the opportunity to finally take some. He says a corner is being turned. Well, I would ask the First Minister, who is the corner being turned on? Because the person who set us on this path, who set this direction, is him. 20 years, 2 decades. And I tell you honestly, our NHS will not survive another decade of this knackered SNP government. Yes.
First Minister.
I'm grateful to Mr Mara for giving way, and he misconstrues my comments, and he does it in a very dangerous way that I want to hold him to account for. Because I willingly accept my responsibility. I'm here answering questions as First Minister every Thursday when Parliament sits to accept my responsibility. The point on blame I was making was the blame that's been foisted on migrants in this country, and half of it has been landed on them by the Labour government in London.
Michael Mara.
I think that's a risible statement. It's below the First Minister. He is absolutely right that there is a climate of fear being nurtured in this country by people on the extreme right. I have to say to him that he has to take, when he talks about his legislative agenda, he has to take responsibility for the record that he produces that can result in people being disenfranchised and scared in their own communities when they don't see a government that is delivering for them. That is part of the responsibility of government, to make sure you build the compact between the politicians and the people. No, thank you, sir. So it's absolutely right that he does take responsibility for that record, because he's completely out of touch on the NHS, Presiding Officer, completely out of touch. 900,000 people on waiting lists in Scotland. Cancer deaths on the rise. Private health care opening up in streets across Scotland. And people are having to empty their bank accounts and go into debt to obtain the care that they so badly need. That's the record that he is so desperate to walk away from. Because that record does have very real consequences, as pointed out by various members today. Today saw the publication of annual drugs deaths figures for Scotland. In 2024, 1,017 people in Scotland lost their lives to addiction and drugs, the worst record in the whole of Europe. 1,017 lives destroyed, 1,017 families ripped apart, 1,017 people left behind for grieving loved ones. For years, this scandal has torn through my home city of Dundee, and yet again, Dundee is in the top 3 areas in Scotland for drug deaths. In 2010, 22 Dundonians were lost to suspected drug deaths, but by 2021 that figure was 52, at which point Nicola Sturgeon admitted that she had taken her eye off the ball. At least some semblance of responsibility. Unfortunately, it deserves 3 paragraphs in our latest tax-avoiding novel. So, tragically, lives are being lost that could well have been saved if Scotland had had a government with its eyes on the ball and its people's interests at its heart. The SNP are content to take Scotland further down the path of managed decline and failure. Scottish Labour knows that that is not good enough. Scots deserve a health service is there when they need it, a place to call home, good jobs, a world-class education system. We used to have these things, but nearly 2 decades of the SNP has hollowed out those services and hobbled our economy. Scotland can't afford a third decade of the SNP. Scottish Labour is ambitious for this country's future. We'll build a country where government delivers the basics, but that everyone has the chance to reach their full potential. We'll fix the NHS, clear the backlogs and end the ATM rush for a GP appointment. We'll improve our schools, we'll support our high streets and grow our economy. We'll end the addiction to waste and respect taxpayers' money. A Scottish Labour government will focus on ordinary people's priorities and deliver the real new direction that Scotland so desperately needs.
Thank you. And I call Murdo Fraser up to 7 minutes. Mr Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Now, normally at this stage in the parliamentary timetable, we debate the programme for government. Of course, we did that back in May, but it's a good opportunity this afternoon to look at the proposals from the Scottish Government, and what we hear from the First Minister, what that tells us about this Government's priorities for the period ahead. And if everybody wanted to see an illustration of what's wrong with the priorities of this Government, is the fact that we look at the parliamentary timetable for this week, and we see the entirety of parliamentary business tomorrow being spent on business that has nothing to do with this Parliament, looking at international affairs. A great opportunity, I'm sure, for people on the SNP bench and elsewhere to grandstand, but a literal waste of parliamentary time. And George Adams said Scotland should have a voice on these issues. He's right. Scotland does have a voice on these issues. We send 56 MPs to Westminster to speak for Scotland on these matters, and I'm sure Mr Adams knows some of them are SNP MPs and utterly useless and incapable of doing their job properly, Presiding Officer. We should be spending our time here productively on the things we can change, not wasting our time on the things we can't. Now, Presiding Officer, we heard from Mr Swinney, as we would expect, about independence. I was just a little bit surprised that in his comments on independence he didn't address the latest revelations from the Scottish Government's own GERS figures that came out just a few weeks ago in recess. Because the net fiscal deficit for Scotland is now up to £26.5 billion, 11.7% of GDP, double the UK level. And that means an independent Scotland would have to find £13 billion worth of either cuts or tax rises. And they never tell us, Presiding Officer, how they would fill that gap. And that figure means that the union dividend is now worth £2,600 extra for every man, woman and child in Scotland, in fiscal transfers from other parts of the United Kingdom. And you might think, with all that extra money to spend on the health service, on education, on infrastructure, on justice, we would have public services so much better than every other part of the United Kingdom, and patently that is not the case, as we've heard in this afternoon's debate. And the other figure we got from the GERS figures is that we now know that the public sector spend in Scotland is equivalent to 52% of gross domestic product. 52%, amongst the highest of any country in the developed world. And when the SNP talk about austerity, are they trying to tell us that more than half of our GDP in the public sector is austerity? And if that's austerity, what figure would they have? Would it be 62%? Would it be 72%? They never tell us. They have huge sums of money at their disposal, and they need to stop wasting them, Presiding Officer. Now, I welcome the First Minister saying there needs to be a focus on economic growth, and we agree. We've just had the figures for the second quarter of this year. GDP growth in Scotland was 0.2%. In the UK, under a dismal Labour Chancellor holding back economic growth, the equivalent figure is 0.3%. So Scotland is growing at just two-thirds the rate, even of the dismal performance of the United Kingdom. And if we look at the long-term trend, since 2011, if the Scottish economy had grown at the same rate as the UK, it would be £10 billion bigger than it is today. That is the SNP's record in government, Presiding Officer. And when they look at these figures, they say, oh, but go back to 2007. And yes, it's right. If you look at the figure, 2007 to 2011, we had rapid growth in the Scottish economy. Why? Because of growth in the oil and gas sector. The very oil and gas sector they want to close down, Presiding Officer. And Kemi Badenoch's absolutely right in what she had to say today in Aberdeen, talking about how we need to take the brakes off in terms of extraction from the North Sea. And that economic underperformance comes at a cost. The Scottish Fiscal Commission talk about the economic performance gap, estimated in 2005-2006 at £1.058 billion to the public sector, £1 billion less than we should have in revenues, thanks to SNP mismanagement. But as Craig Hoy reminded us, we have Ivan McKee riding to the rescue. And we all hope Mr McKee is successful in his battle with his cabinet colleagues who are apparently very resistant. They, according to information released under Freedom of Information, have, and I quote, raised considerable concern about Mr McKee's plans. Well, keep fighting, Mr McKee. We're all behind you to find these savings in the public sector. Now, Presiding Officer, Ben McPherson challenged us to come up with some positive ideas. So I will do just that for Mr McPherson's benefit. We make no apology for demanding a focus on growth, because growth provides wealth. Growth provides more secure, better-paid jobs. Growth provides less poverty. Growth provides more disposable income. Growth provides higher tax revenues. What we should be doing is tackling the barriers to growth. The higher taxes imposed by the SNP on income tax and LBTT, the business rates hammering hospitality, the visitor levy. Now, throughout the summer, I heard so many businesses expressing their concern about a visitor levy coming in on top of all the other bills they have to pay. The excessive regulation, such as the over-bureaucratic short-term let rules or the creaking planning system that needs to be fixed. Presiding Officer, there are other priorities we have to see tackled. We have an NHS with too many people waiting too long. And Anna Sarwar was right to talk about the number of people in Scotland having to pay for private operations because they're simply waiting too long. I met a constituent at the weekend in exactly that position, waiting more than a year for a vital hip replacement, eventually having to dip into savings to go private, and it's happening too often. We have standards in schools dropping below our competitor nations, a growing issues of violence in the classroom and a failure to deliver vital infrastructure. And remember, this is all with £2,600 more per head of population to spend than the rest of the UK. We should have public services so much better than everywhere else with all that money, and that is SNP failure, Presiding Officer. So our approach in closing is simply this. Let's put growth first. Let's take the brakes of oil and gas extraction in the North Sea. Let's get reformed, effective public services. Let's invest in infrastructure. Let's speak up for the victims of crime. Those are the people's priorities, and they're our priorities too.
Thank you. I now call on Shona Robertson to wind up the debate. Cabinet Secretary, up to 9 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I just say, first of all, at the start, that I think Murdo Fraser is so out of touch with the Scottish people who care deeply about the plight of people in Gaza, and they expect their nation's parliament to care too. And I think the compassion that the people of Scotland have is in stark contrast to the lack of compassion on the Tory benches that we've heard today. Can I welcome everyone back to what is a more plural Parliament, Presiding Officer, than we had when we left it in June. Can I also welcome Ruth Maguire back to the Chamber? It's good to see her here. Can I start with Russell Finlay's miserable contribution? Probably reflecting the rather miserable summer he and his colleagues have had, I suspect. Russell Finlay's narrative is really not working for him, it's not working for his party. It's entirely negative, as others have pointed out. It is based around the simple objective of talking down Scotland. It is all they have, and it will continue to be roundly rejected by the population of our nation. Anis Sarwar, despite the hubris, can't escape the simple truth that Anis Sarwar failed to support more funding for the NHS. He failed to support more funding to tackle child poverty. He failed to support more funding for housing to tackle the housing emergency. So it's all talk and no action from Anis Sarwar as usual. And, you know, if Anis Sarwar wants to talk about what's knackered, he only has to look at his knackered Prime Minister and his knackered UK Labour government after 1 year in power. 1 year in power, plummeting in the polls and running scared of reform. So if he wants to use the word knackered from his focus groups, we are very happy to talk about what's knackered, and it is his government and his Prime Minister. In contrast, Ross Greer made a very constructive contribution, and I would agree with many of the things that he had to say. We disagree on some things, but it is about working collaboratively on the things that we agree on. And I would also say that about Alex Cole-Hamilton, because there are many areas where Alex Cole-Hamilton and his colleagues have taken a pragmatic approach to, for example, working with us on the budget to progress on areas where we agree, and I welcome that. I would just point out on the point he made about the attainment gap, however, that we have record levels of literacy and numeracy attainment for both primary and secondary pupils, and we have record low attainment gap in literacy for primary schools. So yes, more to do, but I think we have to recognise where progress has been made. I think Claire Hawkey very well set out the woeful record of the UK Labour government, with a promise of cuts to energy bills only for them to rise, and of course impacting very much on people's household budgets. Pam Duncan-Glancy talked about reducing child poverty, but let me remind her of the facts. Scotland is the only part of the UK where child poverty is falling. It's going up in the areas that the Labour Party control, whether it's Wales or in England. So the reality is very different from Pam Duncan-Glancy's rhetoric. Briefly.
Liam Kerr.
Very grateful. This debate has been on the Scottish Government's priorities, but not one SNP speaker has mentioned the serious challenges in the justice portfolio. Can the people of Scotland therefore conclude that justice is still not a priority for this failing SNP government?
Cabinet Secretary.
We have prioritised justice, and we have prioritised the frontline spend for the Police Scotland and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, both having a real terms increase in their funding, and we see crime in most areas at a record low, and that is a record that we should be proud of. People should feel safe in Scotland. That's not to say there are not challenges with sexual offences and domestic violence, something I take very seriously indeed. But let's not create this idea that Scotland is not a safe place. It is a safe place to live in, and we should all be telling the truth about that. I cannot let this debate pass, Presiding Officer, without challenging something that Craig Hoy said. Now, I was going to do a bit of a light-hearted thing about public sector reform and the explanation in detail that I gave him at the Finance Committee this morning, but I want to turn to something that Craig Hoy said. He said the character of Dumfries has changed and is changing. And I want to know what he means by character. What characteristics is Craig Hoy referring to?
Craig Hoy.
Happily to respond to the Minister, because I spent this summer out talking to real voters and the real world, and they are very, very concerned about the community effects of long-term asylum hotels at the heart of their community. People should not be staying there for 2 to 3 years. That is not a long-term solution, and it is for the Scottish Government and the UK Government now to answer how they intend to solve this problem.
Cabinet Secretary.
Craig Hoy is going to talk about changed characteristics. He needs to explain what characteristics he is talking about, because that is the dangerous rhetoric that brings what we don't want to this place, and it has to stop now. And Craig Hoy should think and reflect upon his statement today. Sarah Boyack talked about action on climate. And I agree that we need action on climate and the transition. But here we are again with the lack of reality, where the UK Labour government has a chance to act. So on Grangemouth, still without the cash that the UK Labour government promised. Yet they've managed to save a second steelworks in England. Meanwhile, Unite the Union have called the Labour government out for the lack of action and the lack of cash that was promised. So let's get away from the rhetoric and let's stump up the cash that your government promised the workers of Grangemouth. Ben McPherson spoke for us all today by exposing the lack of ideas from any of the opposition benches. He made up for that in recognition of the positive achievements of our public services across the summer months. Hard work by our hard-working public servants, and we should not talk down their efforts. It really demeans those who do. And Jamie Green talked about some of the issues that we need to address. And of course, he referred to drug deaths. And I am a representative of an area that has been very much impacted by drug deaths. And I absolutely have the desire to work with others across this chamber, and the organisations are working day in, day out in our communities. And of course we have provided record levels of funding for drugs and alcohol programmes, but without doubt there is more that we need to do, and I absolutely accept that. Can I just make sure Michael Mara is aware that the Western Gateway School in Dundee is actually in the capital plan for Dundee City Council? I thought you would have known that, but there we are. Every day's a learning day, even for Michael Mara. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, can I say that the First Minister in his opening speech laid out in detail the impact of the resources we are putting in and the improvements that are being made in our public services. At no point did he say there wasn't more to do. Of course there is. The actions that we've mentioned cover only a few of the important areas where we'll continue to invest in budgets that were not supported by the opposition parties and deliver positive impacts. We recognise there's more to do. We'll continue to listen, understand the issues that people are facing, and we'll continue to deliver on the people's priorities for the future of Scotland, and that's what we'll focus on.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on priorities for Scotland. It's now time to move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of 4 Parliamentary Bureau motions, and I ask Jamie Hepburn, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, to move motions 18690 and 18691 on committee membership, and 18692 and 18693 on committee substitutes.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. And the question on these motions will be put at decision time. And there are 6 questions to be put as a result of today's business. Can I remind members that if the amendment in the name of Russell Finlay is agreed to, the amendments in the name of Anna Sarwar and Alex Cole-Hamilton will fall. The first question is that Amendment 18671.4 in the name of Russell Finlay, which seeks to amend Motion 18671 in the name of John Swinney on priorities for Scotland, be agreed. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is not agreed, therefore we'll move to a vote, and there will be a short suspension to allow members to access the digital voting system.